Welcome to Get Licensed to Build. This is a free online workshop for those who want to get their California contractor's license. Our goal this morning is to go through all the parts of the license application and give you practical tips to help you complete it correctly and to give you every opportunity to demonstrate your experience and qualifications to get your California contractor's license. We will also help you get ready for your licensing exams and give you a link to a video that shows you exactly what to expect on your test date. Today's webcast is presented by the Contractor State License Board, the government agency responsible for regulating California's construction industry. I'm Dana D'Onofrio from CSLB's License Verification Unit. Joining us is Ronald James from CSLB's License Verification Unit. Good morning.
Good morning. CSLB is overseen by a 15-member board that directs administrative policy for our operations. Our board is made up of 10 public members, including one labor representative, one local building official, and one representative of a statewide senior citizen organization, and 5 contractors. Appointments are made by the governor and the state legislature.
If you are watching right now on either YouTube Live or Facebook Live and want to ask questions, you'll need to join us on WebEx. There's a banner with a link on the top of our homepage, www.cslb.ca.gov. That is also where you can download this presentation to follow along. The presentation file includes clickable bonus links that appear on slides throughout this workshop. We are going to present a lot of information today, so don't worry if you don't get it all. We will archive the video of this workshop and put it on our YouTube channel so you can go back and watch again. To ask a question on WebEx, use the Q&A feature, questions and answers, not the chat feature on the bottom right of your screen. Make sure you send your questions to all panelists. Finally, we tend to get a lot of questions during these workshops on how you document your work experience and what credit you can get for your education or military service. Those questions are fine, but we would ask that you wait to send us those questions until you see that part of the workshop. We will go through your questions at the end of our presentation, which should last about 45 minutes.
The information obtained during this webcast is not, nor is intended to be legal advice. While this webcast contains general information, including legal guidelines for contractor license application, it does not contain definitive statements of the law and may not reflect the most current legal developments in the construction industry. Such guidelines communicated or discussed during this webcast are for informational purposes only. If you have questions about the application of the law for specific situations, you should contact an attorney who is familiar with California construction law or review the latest edition of the CSLB publication, California Contractors License Law and Reference Book. You can download it for free on the CSLB website or purchase it directly from the publisher, LexisNexis. There are links for both at the bottom of the screen.
Here's a list of what we are going to cover today. We will take you through the process for applying for your California contractor's license. First, who needs a license? Why get a contractor's license? The minimum qualifications you'll need to get a license and what credits you might qualify for. The types of business entities, the different CSLB license classifications, including our new B2 residential remodeling classification. We will spend a lot of time giving you tips on how to help fill out your applications, including how to demonstrate your work experience to meet the minimum qualifications. Fingerprint requirements for a criminal background check. We will help you get ready for the exam or exams you'll need to pass in order to get your license. And finally, the other things you'll need to have in place before your license is issued, things like a bond and insurance.
First, we'll look at who needs a license. Here in California, a state contractor's license is needed for all construction projects priced at $500 or more. That total includes both labor and materials, no matter who purchases the materials. The law doesn't let you break down a project into $499 pieces. It's the entire project. Also, you can't charge an hourly rate to get around the $500 threshold. If the hourly cost times the number of hours for the job totals $500 or more, you need a contractor's license. So what is the definition of a contractor? The definition comes from the state's Business and Professional Code. In this case, it's section 7026.1. We've got a link to that code at the top of the page if you downloaded the presentation. I'll read the entire code, but pay special attention to the part we underlined. A contractor is any person, consultant to an owner, builder, firm, association, organization, partnership, business trust, corporation, or company who or which undertakes, offers to undertake, purports to have the capacity to undertake, or submits a bid to construct any building or home improvement project or part thereof. In other words, you don't have to do the work to break the law. You must have a contractor's license just to advertise that you can do the construction work, or even to give a bid for a construction job if the bid totals $500 or more.
So you may be asking yourself, why should I get a license? Here are a few good reasons. First, you can take pride in being a licensed professional. It shows you've taken the steps to get licensed and you are serious about your career choice. It allows you to make valuable contributions to your local community. Unlicensed contractors must operate in the shadows and cannot help make their community a better place to live. Next, it allows you to get paid for the work you do. There is value to the work done by a licensed professional. Being licensed also gives you legal options if customers don't pay you. Unlicensed contractors do not have a legal right to take someone to court to get paid because the work required a license and they weren't licensed to do the work in the first place. Also, you would be able to use the mechanics lien law. Next, you don't have to look over your shoulder with fear of getting caught. Contracting without a valid California license can lead to misdemeanor charges. Those caught face a first offense sentence of up to 6 months in jail and/or a $5,000 fine, and potential administrative fines anywhere between $200 to $15,000. Subsequent violations can result in increased criminal penalties and fines. In addition, you may face felony charges if you contract without a license when one is required in a state or federally declared disaster area, or if you try to pass yourself off as a licensed contractor by illegally using a license number. Remember, there are no educational requirements to get a license. Also, you do not have to go to a license preparation school to get your contractor's license.
So, what do you need to get your license? First, is it important to understand that CSLB does not license individuals. We license companies or businesses, also called entities. Many entities are one-person operations, but know that every entity, even a one-person operation, must have a qualifier. That's someone who has the minimum experience and is responsible for the operations of the company. Here's a short list of minimum qualifications you will need. You must be at least 18 years of age. You must have either a valid Social Security number or valid Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, or ITIN. You can qualify the license in one of two ways. First, you can qualify the license by having at least 4 years of experience within the last 10 years as a journey person, foreperson, supervising employee, or contractor in the trade being applied for. Or you can also get a qualifier for the license who has that required experience. We will spend time talking about how you can demonstrate your experience on your application later in this presentation.
It may be possible for you to substitute your education, technical training, and apprenticeship training for some of the required experience. We tend to get a lot of questions on this. First, CSLB cannot prejudge your experience. Due to the number of applications we receive and process every month, we don't have the staff time that would be needed to prejudge your experience. We can only review your documents after you apply for your license. Next, to get education credit, the coursework must be directly related to the work you will be doing as a contractor. Your education cannot be substituted for more than 3 years or 36 months of required experience. meaning you will need at least 1 year of practical experience if you get the full 36 months of education credit. To apply for education credit, you must provide CSLB with written documentation. That means a copy of any apprenticeship completion certificates you earned, or get official technical school or college transcripts. Have your transcripts mailed to you. Do not open the envelope, leave it sealed, and include it with your CSLB applications packet. Note that high school courses will not earn you any credit towards your contractor's license.
If you're looking to get education credit to meet the 4 years or 48 months of experience, you'll need to get your transcripts first. This is the kind of credit you can expect to receive for your education. Note that for some areas, we are only giving you averages. You will see that your credit will be determined on a case-by-case basis. We're not going to be able to give you any more guidance than what you see on this slide. So our best advice is do not rely on the combination of your experience and education credits to barely hit the 4-year experience mark. There is always the real possibility you will not get as much education credit as you were hoping. Let's go through the chart from the most credit you can get to the least. The most education credit you can get is for a Bachelor of Science degree in construction management. That degree will get you the full 36 months of credit. Next is a master's or bachelor's degree in business or a law degree. Any of those will get you 24 months of credit. An associate in science degree in construction management will get you 18 months credit. A bachelor's degree in some other major will get you an average of 18 months credit. An associate degree in a major besides construction management will get you an average of 6 months credit. Credit for individual college classes is given on a case-by-case basis, usually with a maximum of 6 months credit. Apprenticeship completion certificates will get you 24 to 36 months, depending on the classification of the program. For example, a sheet metal worker apprenticeship gets you 24 months credit for the C20 HVAC or C43 sheet metal classifications only. A lineman apprenticeship gets you 36 months in C7 low voltage and C10 electrical classifications only. If you have transcripts for other technical training you've taken, you might be able to get some minimal credit as well. Again, don't use your education credits to try and squeak by the 4-year or 48-month requirement.
If you served in the military, some of that service might count as well. On the bottom of the page, you'll see a bonus link to our CSLB Military Application Assistance Program where you can learn more. The license qualifier also must pass 2 different exams, both taken on a computer at one of CSLB's authorized test centers. One exam is on California business law. The other is in the specific trade covered by the license. We also have limited specialty licenses, which we will discuss later. Those licenses only require the qualifier to take the law and business exam. As we mentioned, the qualifier is one who must take and pass the required exams or qualify for a waiver. We're not going to spend a lot of time on a waiver, only to note that you might be able to request a waiver from taking one or both exams in very specific situations. We recommend that you look at the CSLB website for more information on those specific situations. We have included a bonus link at the bottom of the page. The qualifier must also undergo a criminal background check. We will go more into depth on that in a few minutes. After the license is issued, the qualifier must be in a position to exercise direct supervision and control of the company's operations. They are also responsible for all workmanship issues. It is also important to note that if you are trying to get a B general building contractor license you hire subcontractors to work under you, you are responsible as the project's prime contractor for the work that they do.
The next thing you're going to need to determine before applying for your license is what type of entity your business will be. There are 4 types. First is a sole ownership, where the owner or responsible managing employee may serve as a license qualifier. Just about 2/3 of the contracting businesses in California are sole ownerships. Second, a corporation, where either the current officers designated as the responsible managing officer or the responsible managing employee may serve as the qualifier. Just under 1/3 of our licenses are corporations. A distant third is a partnership, where either of the general partners or a responsible managing employee may serve as qualifier. That's 2% of our licenses. Finally, a limited liability company, or LLC, where a responsible managing member, a responsible managing manager, responsible managing officer, or responsible managing employee may serve as the qualifier. About 1.5% of California construction companies are LLCs.
Now let's talk about license classifications. A contractor's license can include multiple classifications, although you must select one when filling your application. While there are more than 40 license classifications in California, they all fall under 3 distinct categories. There is a bonus link to our classifications list at the bottom of the screen. First is Class A, or General Engineering Contractors. These are contractors who deal with fixed works that require specialized engineering knowledge and skill. A contractors are the ones who build projects such as freeways, skyscrapers, and dams. Today, there are over 19,000 A contractors in the state of California. Next is Class B, or General Building Contractors. This is the largest class of contractors in California with more than 133,000. B contractors have a principal business dealing with any structure built, being built, or to be built that requires as part of its construction at least 2 unrelated building trades or crafts. In other words, a B contractor shouldn't take a prime contract for any project involving trades other than framing or carpentry, unless the prime contract requires at least 2 unrelated building trades other than framing or carpentry. There is no limitation on B contractors to stop them from taking on projects that only include framing or carpentry. The final class is C, or Specialty Contractors. These licenses are for construction work that requires a special skill and whose principal contracting business involves the use of specialized building trades or crafts. Examples from the class include C10, Electrical Contractors, C20, HVAC Contractors, C27, Landscaping Contractors, C36, Plumbing Contractors, C39, Roofing Contractors, C46, Solar Contractors, and C53, Swimming Pool Contractors, just to name a few. There are also 30 limited specialty classes under the C61 classification. These include the C61/D34 prefabricated equipment class. More than 209,000 contractors hold a C license in California.
CSLB's newest licensing classification is called the B2 Residential Remodeling Classification. The B2 allows contractors who don't have structural framing experience to get a license with CSLB. Here's what interested applicants need to know. B2 license holders must engage in 3 or more trades or crafts on a residential project. B2 licenses also are limited to working on existing residential wood frame structures. There are some things B2 license holders cannot do. They cannot make structural alterations to load-bearing partitions and walls. They cannot install or extend electrical or plumbing systems. They can make modifications to existing systems, for example, install recessed lighting or alter plumbing for 2 shower heads. B2 licensees also cannot install or replace an HVAC system. Like all other CSLB licensees, B2 applicants, licensees must comply with CSLB experience, examination, license bond, and workers' compensation insurance requirements. If you have any more questions about the B2 license, email the classifications deputy at classifications@cslb.ca.gov.
When you are ready to apply for a license, here are the 2 forms you will need. On the left is a license application. On the right is a certification of work experience. You can get these forms on the CSLB website. There is a bonus link on the left side of the page, so be sure to download this presentation. We will give you a closer look at the different sections of these forms a little later.
Okay, now let's break down the steps of the application process. First, identify who will be the qualifier for your license. That person will be responsible for exercising direct supervision and control of the company. If you're using an RME or a responsible managing employee as your qualifier, determine if he or she can qualify for an exam waiver. Be aware of companies you pay to connect you with a licensed qualifier. In some cases, these qualifiers cannot exercise the direct supervision needed, or they aren't willing to do or understand their role as a qualifier. Next, make sure you complete the correct application. There are two options. One is the original application for original contractor's license, and two, the application for original contractor's license examination waiver. We've got links to both at the bottom of the page.
The next step is to determine your company name. See the application instructions for examples. Some things to keep in mind: your name cannot be misleading or imply that you qualify for a license classification other than what you were getting. For example, if you're going to apply for a C36 plumbing license, you cannot have a company name of John Smith Plumbing Construction Heating and Drywall. Corporate and LLC names must match exactly the name registered with the California Secretary of State's office. You can also use what is called a DBA, which stands for Doing Business As. The main things to remember here is the DBA name cannot be misleading, and you must use that name in all advertising and on all your contracts. Next, you'll want to get together certifications to support your work experience. You should do this even if you apply for an exam waiver. Feel free to use multiple pages if necessary. Next, be sure to know if you are a military veteran. Some of your military service may be used to meet your 4 years of experience qualifications. Also, your application may be expedited and receive a possible 50% reduction in your initial licensing fee through our Military Application Assistance Program. There is a bonus link at the bottom of the screen for more information on that program. To participate, you must have not been dishonorably discharged. Be sure to include a copy of your latest DD-214, long form paperwork showing your discharge status with your application. The next couple of items are basic but important. Proofread your application for any missing information. Make sure you have provided an answer to all necessary fields. Second, don't forget to sign and date the application. Finally, determine if you need special accommodations to take your exams. If so, complete a request form and submit it with your application. We'll talk about the use of translators a little later.
Next, let's take a look at our fingerprint requirements, which are used for a criminal background check. This is a list of those who must submit a full set of fingerprints to CSLB depending upon the type of business entity. All applicants, each corporate officer, each member and manager, each partner, each owner, the responsible managing employee, and all home improvement salespersons. If you're in California, you must submit fingerprints electronically with what is called live scan. You can get an updated list of live scan locations in California broken down by county on the Attorney General's website. We have a link here so you could simply go to the Attorney General's website and search for live scan. You will also see we have a bonus link at the bottom of the screen to the fingerprint information page on our CSLB website. If you're out of state, it's a longer process to get your fingerprints. That's because you must submit hard copies of them the old-fashioned way. Those take anywhere between 3 and 6 months for the FBI and Department of Justice to process. So you might want to consider traveling to California to get your electronic live scan done here.
So what happens if you have any criminal convictions? CSLB may deny your license for the following reasons. First, if your conviction is substantially related to the duties, functions, and qualifications of a contractor. Also, if your conviction involves fraud or a violent crime. There are other factors CSLB also considers. They are the nature and severity of the crimes, the amount of time that has passed since a conviction, and any evidence of rehabilitation that you submit to CSLB. CSLB evaluates felony criminal convictions which occurred within 7 years of the application date. For misdemeanor criminal convictions, we would look back for 3 years of the application from the application date. That's unless the convictions were a violent felony, certain sexual crimes, or financial crimes related to construction. CSLB denies only 1% of the total applications we get based on criminal convictions. You'll also note the bonus link to your fingerprint information page.
Okay, along with education credits we talked about earlier, this next section is probably the most important of the entire workshop and the part of the application that causes the most headaches for applicants. It is how you determine your work experience on your application, or demonstrate your work experience on your application. Remember, the license qualifier needs 4 years or 48 months of experience within the past 10 years in the classification for which you're applying. The experience must be at no less than a journeyman level or as a foreman, supervising employee, contractor, or owner builder. A journeyman is defined as an experienced worker who is fully qualified as opposed to a trainee and can perform trades without supervision, or one who has completed an apprenticeship program.
There's a limited amount of space on the application to show your certified work experience. So feel free to use additional pages if needed and simply attach them at the end of the work experience form. Use as many certifications of work experience forms as you need to prove the required 4 years of experience within the last 10 years. Use a different form for each certifier. Be as accurate as possible. Make sure the person certifying your work experience describes the actual work you performed and the dates in which you performed them. We will now share some examples of both good and unacceptable descriptions to demonstrate work experience. Do not copy and paste this information directly onto your application. These are just examples.
At the top of this chart is the classification and type of experience you're trying to demonstrate. This first example is journey person experience. The overall theme we'll keep repeating is the more specific the description, the better. Note, the work experience form should be completed by your certifier, someone who has knowledge and has observed your work experience for the classification you're applying for. That person does not have to be a licensed contractor. Our first example is for the Class B general building contractor. The best type of description your certifier would use for journeyman experience is to be specific. Journey person experience must include hands-on work like this. Bob performed rough and finish carpentry, concrete forming and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior, exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes. An unacceptable description would be something generic like residential general building trades.
For four-person experience, the description must include some hands-on work and/or supervisory work. Here's an example of the best type of description. Bob oversaw other staff at job sites performing rough and finish carpentry, concrete forming and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior and exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes. Again, an unacceptable description would be something generic like residential general building trades.
For supervising employee experience, the description should include an explanation of how you arrived at a supervisor level. An example is, as a construction lead on multiple projects, Bob supervised rough and finish carpentry, concrete forms and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior, exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes.
For out-of-state contractor experience, the description must also include examples of work done that were out of state, military, on federal lands, or work for a government entity. Applicants can qualify as a journey person, four-person, or supervising employee. A tip, Be specific about your duties and employment circumstances.
Our next example is for the C27 landscaping contractor, first for experience at the journeyman level. The best type of description your certifier would use would be Jane performed landscape construction, maintenance, and installation of sprinklers, ground plants, low voltage lighting, ornamental yard art, concrete mow strips, and pathways and tree pruning. An unacceptable explanation would be gardening, yard maintenance, planting.
For a C27 licensing foreperson, the description should indicate overseeing other staff performing the trades. And for a C27 supervising employee, the description should include an explanation of how you arrived at the supervisor level for the trades on a project.
Finally, for out-of-state contractors, the same guidance that we showed you for general building contractors is required. Be sure to include examples of your out-of-state work, as well as work for military on federal lands or for a government entity. Be sure to be specific when you describe your duties and employment circumstances.
By law, CSLB must randomly review and verify all the information provided on at least 3% of our applications. Our next 3 slides run down the acceptable documentation you can use to support your work experience in the event that your application was selected and you were asked to provide additional documentation. The supporting documentation should not be mailed in with your application. You will only need to provide this information if requested by CSLB staff. On the lower right of the screen, you'll see a link to this publication on our website, along with additional information on experience documentation. If you look at the chart, you can see the first column is for documents you can use if you were employed by a licensed contractor. The second column is for documenting your experience if you've been self-employed. The third column is for documentation you will need if you are applying for a Class B general building contractor license and need to use owner-builder experience to meet the experience requirements. Here's the next page of acceptable documentation. Again, you can click on the link to view and print this publication. If you do not have this information readily available, you may want to begin to gather it now, just in case you are asked to provide it in the future. Remember, you are trying to demonstrate 4 years of experience within the last 10 years. CSLB staff may contact the certifier of experience or other parties to verify the experience.
One other note, CSLB gets more than 1,000 applications each month, so our application processing staff has seen it all. They've got 2 pieces of advice. First, don't cut and paste from this presentation. Also, don't try to get around having to take a trade test by applying for multiple subcategories under the C61 limited specialty classification. Okay, that is the content you'll need to fill out your application. Before getting it to CSLB, double check to make sure you did not miss anything. Be sure to sign and date it as well. And don't forget to include the all-important $450 application fee. You'll pay the initial licensing fee of $200 for a sole owner license or $350 for a non-sole owner license after you pass your exam or exams. Then put your application packet in the mail to CSLB or hand deliver to one of our public counters. We've got a bonus link at the bottom of the screen with our office locations.
Parts of the application, Section 1, business name and address. Now that we have gone through the information you'll need to include, here's a closer look at the application so you can see where the information goes. Section 1 is where you list your business name. Remember, when selecting a business name, make sure the name that you have selected is compatible with the classification and the entity that you're applying for and is not misleading. If your business is a corporation or LLC, you will need to make sure that the name you provide in this section matches exactly the business name registered with the California Secretary of State's office. In line 2, you will indicate what classification you are applying for. The mailing address and phone number that you list on line 3A and 3C will be made public on CSLB's website once you are licensed. Parts of the application, Section 2, business entity. In Section 2, you will select your business entity. If you are applying for a corporation or LLC, you will need to provide your registration number provided to you by the California Secretary of State's office. Make sure to pay extra attention to the instructions in this section pertaining to the entity for which you are applying.
In Section 3, you will list the qualifier's information. Remember, the qualifier is the person that meets the experience requirements and will be responsible for the direct supervision and control of construction operations. The qualifier will be the person taking the exams. On line 6, you will list any previous or current license numbers you've held. You will also need to list the percentage of the new business owned by the qualifier. On line 7, you will need to indicate what position will be held by the qualifier. Each entity has different personnel requirements. You will need to make sure that you have listed all positions depending on the entity you have selected. You can find more information on this on pages 2 through 4 of the application instructions. Line 8 is where you will sign and date your application.
Parts of the application, Section 4, personnel full legal names and addresses. Section 4 is where you will list the personnel information for all remaining personnel that will be listed on the license. For example, if you are applying for a corporation, you will need to indicate who will be the responsible managing officer or employee, president, secretary, and treasurer. Again, more information can be found on page 6 of the application instructions. If you will have more than 4 people on your license, you can make additional copies of this page and include it with your application. For corporations and LLCs, every person who is an officer, responsible manager, or member, or director of a corporation or limited liability company shall be listed on the application as a member of the personnel of record for the license. All personnel that will be listed on the license must sign the application in Section 4.
Section 5 is a series of yes and no questions, so we're not going to cover those here. Section 6, you may be granted credit towards the 4-year experience requirement based on your education. Question 17 asks if you have completed an educational or apprenticeship program. You will need to submit official sealed transcripts if you would like to be considered for this credit. If you attended formal training or an apprenticeship program, you will need to provide a certificate of completion. Get those sealed transcripts mailed to you, then include the sealed transcripts with your application packet. Do not have the program send transcripts directly to CSLB. You don't want to take the chance that we're not able to match them up with your application. CSLB may grant you up to 3 years of credit based on your education. This credit is not on a year-to-year basis, meaning if you have a 2-year college degree, you won't necessarily be granted 2 years of credit towards the experience requirement. You may qualify for this credit regardless of when you completed your education. The 10-year time frame does not apply to education. You may also apply for this credit even if your education was received out of the country. If your degree was in any other language other than English, it must be translated and evaluated by an accredited evaluation service that does business within the United States.
Parts of the application, Certification of Work Experience, Part 1. Now we will discuss the certification of work experience. Part 1 will be filled out by you, the applicant. Here, you will list the information about your employer where you gained your experience. If you were self-employed when you gained the experience, please make sure to check the box in line 2. If you are applying for a B general construction license and will be using experience obtained while working on your own property, make sure to mark the box in line 4 and complete an owner-builder construction project experience form that we will discuss later.
Part 2 will be filled out by the certifier. In this section, the certifier must include the dates in which you obtain the experience. They must also select if you were working on a part-time or full-time basis. Keep in mind, if you're working part-time, you will receive 50% credit for that time, which means you will need to provide 8 years of experience within the last 10 years to meet the 4-year requirement. On line 6, your certifier will need to list the duties that you performed or supervised that were considered critical for the classification you're applying for. You can read a description of critical duties in CSLB's description of classification booklet available on our website. Do not copy and paste the description from the booklet. This is only to give you an idea of what CSLB considers critical duties for each classification. Your certifier should complete this section in their own words and be as complete and accurate as possible.
Parts of the application, certification of work experience, final part. The final part of the work experience certificate is also to be completed by your certifier. They need to list their relationship to you and provide their contact information. Lastly, they will need to sign and date the certification.
Parts of the application, owner builder, B, general building construction project experience. The next form we will discuss is the owner builder, B, general building construction project experience form. This form only needs to be completed if you're applying for a B, general construction license, and you want to receive experience credit for working on projects on your own property. A separate form is required for each project. The experience must be verifiable through building permits, final inspections, and other documentation. You will need to list the building permit number on line 6. On line 7, you will need to provide the scope of the project. In boxes 8 through 10, you will need to provide more detailed information about the project. Question 11 asks if other general construction contractors worked on the project and what trades they performed. Remember, this information be as complete and accurate as possible.
With all the information we just covered, this is a good time to remind you that we're recording this workshop. We'll post the video on our YouTube channel so you can go back and rewatch it in case there's anything you missed. Okay, so you've got your application submitted. How do you check the status of that application? Here are 2 resources. First is the secured check. You'll need your application fee number and your contractor's PIN number to get an update. We'll send you that information after we receive, cashier, and key your application into the system. The second way to check is to look online at our processing times. Each week, we update our website with the date we receive the paperwork for a specific process. So, look for the date being worked on and know that if the date shown is after the date we likely received your paperwork, it's likely we're busy working on your application. As you can imagine, CSLB receives hundreds, if not thousands, of documents every day, and we probably they're received. So be sure to take the extra time getting the application right so we don't have to send it back to you to correct, and then start processing your application again.
When your application has been posted, CSLB will send you a notice to schedule for examination and a study guide. You may then schedule your exams through the online scheduling process. CSLB has many authorized test centers throughout California and encourages candidates to take their exams at the nearest test center.
If you are an applicant whose first language isn't English and you don't feel confident taking your exams in English, we do allow you to use a translator. The translator, who you provide, simply reads you the exam questions. Question 16 on the application asks if you need to use a translator to complete the examination and the language the exam will be translated into. The translator must be approved by CSLB in advance. You cannot just show up on the day of your examination to the test center with someone to translate the exam for you. When you have an exam date, make sure you do not miss it. If you fail to appear for your exam, you will have to pay a non-refundable $100 fee to reschedule. That fee may be waived once with documented evidence of a medical emergency or other circumstances beyond your control. Also, we have study guides available for each of our exams. Included in each study guide, you will find a list of sections and topics covered by the exam. They also include sample questions, how each section of the exam is weighted, and recommended resources that you can use to prepare for the examination. These study guides are available online on our website. There's a bonus link to them on the bottom of the screen.
Here's a quick look at 2 of those study guides. The first is the Law and Business exam, which all qualifiers must take, no matter which license classification, including the D series limited classes. You can see the guide contains a breakdown of examination topics, some test strategies, sample questions, and resources that were used to help create that exam. You will see the same format on the B General Building Study Guide. We would recommend that you really pay attention to the exam content here. especially how we have broken down what percentage of questions there will be on each of the 5 topics on the screen. On the lower right of both of these 2 slides, you'll see bonus links to the actual study guide, as well as a link to the complete list of study guides.
On your testing date, plan to arrive at least 15 minutes early for your exam. Give yourself extra time to get checked in. Follow the instructions provided online when scheduling your exam date. We've also produced a short What to Expect on Test Day video that you can watch on our YouTube channel. The link is at the bottom of your screen.
You'll take your exam on a computer using a keyboard and mouse. Before starting, you'll see an on-screen tutorial that will take you through the process. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions. You'll also see a space on each question where you can, if you want, submit a comment about that question. You'll get 3.5 hours to complete each exam. Don't arrive late, or that may reduce the amount of time you get to complete your exam, or you may not be admitted to the exam and will have to reschedule. You'll get your results at the end of the exam. If you don't pass the exam, you will not be allowed to review the questions you missed, but you will get a statement showing how you did on each section of the exam. You can reschedule the exam as many times as you like within the 18-month period, as long as you pay the non-refundable $100 rescheduling fee each time. Each rescheduled test must be at least 3 weeks following the previous test.
After you pass your exams, what happens next? First, you'll need to pay your initial license fee, $200 for a sole owner license, and $350 for a non-sole owner license. That will be good for 2 years. You'll also need to complete an online asbestos open book exam. Plus, you'll need to file your required $25,000 contractor surety bond and possibly some other bonds depending on what type of business entity you'll have. And you will need to get your required insurance policy. If you've got employees, you'll need to get workers' compensation insurance. If you don't have employees, you must file a workers' compensation exemption with CSLB. You can also submit this online. Please note that workers' compensation insurance is also required for all contractors applying for the C8 concrete, C20 warm, air heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, C22 asbestos abatement, C39 roofing, and C61/D49 tree service classifications, whether or not they have any employees. If you're going to be an LLC, you'll also need liability insurance. See our website for more information. Please note that your insurance company or broker can submit your insurance information to CSLB directly on our website.
In about 5 to 10 business days after your license has been issued, CSLB will send you a wall certificate and plastic pocket license card. Display the wall certificate in your main office or chief place of business. Carry your pocket card with you, especially in situations where you're going to solicit business, talk to potential customers, or sign contracts. We encourage consumers to ask to see your pocket license. If you're going to have sales people working for you, be sure to get them registered as a home improvement salesperson with CSLB. Check our website for more on how to do that. Your license will be good for 2 years. It will expire on the last day of the month when it was issued. Be sure to put that expiration date on your calendar, in your phone, anywhere you need, so you won't forget it. CSLB will send you a renewal notice in the mail approximately 60 days before it expires, but ultimately, it is your responsibility to renew your license on time.
Here are a couple of other important deadlines to keep in mind. First, notify CSLB within 90 days if you move or change your business address. Your renewal notice will be sent to the address of record that we have on file. If you're not at that address anymore, you're probably not going to get it. Plus, the Postal Service will not forward state government mail. Finally, notify CSLB within 90 days of all changes to personnel on your license, especially when it involves the qualifier of the license.
Once you get your license and get to work, you might want to hire someone as a salesperson to solicit, sell, and negotiate home improvement contracts on your behalf outside of your place of business. These people are called home improvement salespersons, or HIS. Without an HIS, the official personnel of record on a license are the only ones who can solicit, sell, negotiate, or execute a contract. That includes individual contractors, licensed qualifiers, partners, corporation officers, and LLC responsible managing officers, members, managers, or employees. An HIS can work for more than one contractor. The licensee must notify CSLB when they either associate or disassociate an HIS with their license. This process can now be completed online as well.
There are a couple of exceptions to note. First, are those who only schedule appointments for the contractor or registered HIS, and bona fide service and repair people. These are the folks you call out for repairs, including for things like air conditioning, heating, and plumbing. But those service and repair people are limited to the work that was initially requested by the buyer or homeowner. For example, if your AC goes out and you call an HVAC company to come out, the service person does not have to be a registered salesperson. But if they go beyond the repair itself and sell you a new HVAC system, they will have to be a registered HIS. Also, don't employ an unregistered salesperson. That subjects you to administrative discipline, and the salesperson might get a citation or possibly even a criminal misdemeanor. We've got bonus links at the bottom of this page if you want to look at the actual code sections of law. So, okay, that is our presentation. Now it is time to answer your questions.
All right, so it looks like our first one, as a newly licensed contractor, is it recommended to obtain a C license first, or can I move straight into my B license if my experience is in general contracting? Well, a B license would be general building, but you can go into any classification on a license immediately, depending upon you having 4 years of experience in that classification in the past 10 years. So there's no, we don't recommend a path of which classification you go for first. That's up to you.
As a general building contractor, Class A, can I hire subcontractors to perform electrical, solar, HVAC, and civil work that have the appropriate California licenses in those areas? So with the A class, you cover a large area of what you want to hire the subcontractors for. However, if they have the appropriate license for the work that you want to not self-perform, you could hire, you say Class B. Okay, so where'd the question go?
We lost
Give us just a second here.
I lost it.
Where did it go? Oh, there it goes. Go down. Sorry, Class B. Okay, so you don't have to self-perform. You can hire self-contractors if you're a licensed B and you don't want to do self-perform the work of the electrical, the solar, the HVAC. That is a possibility for you.
And just remember, as we stated in the presentation, you are still responsible for those in the performance of that work on the project. So even though you hire or subcontract out somebody with that classification, you're still responsible for the work being performed. The free book link doesn't work. Is there a new link? Looks like they've put the link in there for you. All right. Okay, my husband has 10 years of experience working for a licensed contractor. He has an ITIN. I am looking into getting a Class B license. I have no practical experience, but I have a bachelor's degree on business. Can he be my RME? Yes, you can apply for a license and have someone else as the qualifier on that license. The qualifier just has to have the 4 years or 48 months of experience in the last 10 years. So yes, he could potentially be your qualifier for your license. Your education's not going to come into effect because you're not applying for the qualifier on the license. He's the qualifier. This a little. Did I go too far?
I think so.
Whoa. What happened? Sorry, we're having a little technical issue with the questions.
What are the application fees I need to submit with the application? What is the initial license fee and when do we pay that? So when you're applying initially, you are paying the $450 application fee that is submitted with your completed application. And that is, again, the application fee. So the initial license fee is due upon when you are approved for issuance. The initial license fee is based on the entity that you're applying for. If it's a sole ownership, it's $200. If it's any other entity, it's $350. And you will be instructed in a letter, which is a bond and fee letter that tells you, hey, go ahead and get your ILF and submit your insurance that is required for a licensee.
This is a follow-up to the previous, and what kind of certification does he need from his employer? You're going to use the certification of work experience, which is included in the application, and the employer is going to fill out his license number, name of his license, and then the dates and the type of work that was performed. So the certification is the certification of work experience, which is included in the application.
I ordered a contractor bond and LLC employee worker bond in last week of May. I haven't received the forms. When will I receive them? So as an applicant, you cannot, or as a licensee, you cannot order those blank bonds. Those are provided directly to the agents of your insurance, and they have to request those. Those get mailed out directly to them, but they are not sent to an applicant or to a licensee.
Is project management experience valid to qualify as a contractor experience? In general, no, unless you're a project manager as a supervising employee or a construction manager. Then, as stated in the program, you'll need to include on the certification of work experience how you became that manager or supervising employee. And that usually requires you stating, or your certifier stating, that you got that experience from working on certain projects or managing certain projects. In other words, how did you become a manager or a supervisor of it?
Does a LEED certification count towards experience or credit?
Would need a little more information on that, and it would depend on the classification as well.
How can I know if a person is an acceptable certifier? Well, a certifier is someone who has firsthand knowledge of the experience that they have written on the certification of work experience form. So there are several options of who can be your certifier. Again, it doesn't have to be a licensed contractor. It does not have to be the employer. Business associate is listed, fellow employee. There's a union representative. If they have firsthand knowledge of the experience, they can be your certifier. There's not somebody who we're going to say is not acceptable, because we are going to be looking at the whole picture, not just the certifier, but the experience that was listed by the certifier.
Can the business entity be changed in the future without having to apply for a new license? No. So when you change the entity of a business, you're also applying for a new license. Now, there are provisions that original license number can be reissued to the new entity. So in other words, if you had a sole owner license and you have now formed a corporation, you apply for a new license, but there are provisions that you can have that number reissued to the new business. You do need to remember that in many of those cases where a license is reissued to the new entity, a sole owner to a corp to an LLC, most of those are one-way streets. So once you transfer that license over to the new entity, it is the property of that new entity and it can't go backwards.
If the applicant is an owner's rep working for a large corporation and hired general contractors and oversaw the entire construction work, does that experience count? So you cannot supervise licensed contractors. They're licensees. They've already gone through the process, and you will not get credit for supervising licensees. If you were supervising employees of the business that you were working for, that would be different. But in general, you cannot get experience from, if it was the entire construction work and you were saying, hey, you hired contractors, I need you to go do this and do that. Yeah, no credit is granted for that. Again, employees of the business only, not the licensees.
As a CEO of an out-of-state corporation, who is permitted to be the qualifier of experience? And I'm guessing an officer of the company is the question. Once again, it's the same as with anyone. An out-of-state corporation to do business in California first has to be would be a corporation in California. So you would be registered at the California Secretary of State as a registered corporation within California first. Then that corporation can apply for a license. And on that license, the qualifier can be any of the previously stated people. So one of the officers as a responsible managing officer or a responsible managing employee are both options for a corporation. LLC, you have the addition of, could also be one of the responsible managing members or managers that's listed at Secretary of State, as well as a LLC responsible officer or employee.
Do I need a B2 license to build furniture or cabinetry that mounts to a wall? So a B2 is for residential remodeling, and it has to have 3 unrelated trades. If you're building cabinetry, I would say that would probably be more in line with a C6. A classification would be required, but not the B2. The B2, again, would have to have 3 unrelated trades in your experience. So it could be cabinetry, it could be lath and plastering, and it could be landscaping, but not just to do cabinetry or build furniture. That would be a different classification.
How often is a license exam offered? We partner with PSI as our authorized testing centers. And so there are, I believe, over 20 locations throughout California, and they do testing every day. I don't believe they do it Sunday, but they do Saturday testing, and they also have evening hours available as well. But it is 6 days a week at PSI testing centers. How long do you have between application approval and when you must register for schedule the exam? So once you've sent in your application and we have considered it a complete application, we designate it as a posted application. And at that point, you will have 18 months to complete your exam process. for the 2 exams or 1 exam, however many are required for you. I believe there is a 3-week wait from when your application is posted as to when you can schedule your first exam through the online scheduling through PSI. But after that, so your first exam could be as soon as 3 weeks out from when your application is posted, and then you have 18 months to complete that process.
If I have a C20 license and I want to get my C36, will I qualify for a waiver regarding work experience? Unfortunately, no, because the HVAC and the plumbing are 2 separate classifications. You would have to show 4 years full-time experience in the C36 plumbing within the last 10 years and you would be required to test for that C36. Now, since you already hold the C20, you would not have to take the law exam, but you would have to take the trade. Generally, how much credit do you get for work experience for owner-builder work when you get a permit for your work? So that's a loaded question. It's honestly dependent upon the square footage of the work that was performed that's listed on the owner-builder form, as well as the time it took you to do the work. So there is not an answer that I can give to that. It's solely based on what you put down on that paperwork for us to review.
And that form will be reviewed by an experienced deputy who will look at the square footage. And the general information is they go off how much time a regular contractor would have taken to perform that work. So while you may have taken 3 years remodeling your house to put in an extra bedroom or something, they're going to go off the time allotted a regular contractor performing that work. And that may only be 6 months of credit towards that project. But that's all done on a case-by-case basis with the experienced deputy. Can you provide a link to more information on establishing an LLC versus operating a DBA as it relates to the application process? Well, the actual establishing an LLC, that is all handled by Secretary of State. Operating as a DBA can be done as a corporation or an LLC. Sometimes the DBA is just so that your name is not misleading for the registered LLC name. So as far as application requirements, if you look in the instructions for an original application, it will give you the breakdown of the entities and the various ways that you can list the business names on the application.
In addition, on the LLCs or corporation, which one would be better? You might want to consult an attorney, a construction attorney, or a CPA to see what would be monetarily more efficient for you to run your business. Just to be clear, if I have a bachelor's of science degree and a master's of business administration degree, I will only get credit for the MBA 24 months. I can't stack those 2 degrees to get a 36-month correct. That is correct. One, if you have additional, you have your BA and then you get your master's, you can only use one of those. And if you submit both of them, we're going to go with the one that will give you higher. But yes, you can only use one. You cannot stack them.
Class C20 license is the first step submitting the application, and how do I do to LLC? Is there a website for that process? So for us in licensing, yes, the first process is to submit an application. However, if you're going to do it as an LLC, you will want to form that LLC first at Secretary of State, because part of the application process is to list your Secretary of State registration number on the application. Once again, something to keep in mind, if the name of your LLC is not descriptive to the classification that you're going to, you may end up having to add a DBA as well to specify. So in other words, if you're going for the C20, you could have a LLC of ABC Landscaping LLC, but since you're going for the C20, you're going to need to add a DBA that indicates that you're an HVAC licensee.
I have a BS in finance. Will 1 year of work experience as a journeyman be sufficient, or will I need 2 years work experience? As stated in our presentation, we do not recommend putting all your eggs in one basket pertaining to your education. Again, it's going to depend on what classification that you're applying for, and what your and when we review your completed sealed transcript, whether or not how much experience we're going to be able to give you. We cannot predetermine that for you at this moment.
How often the license exam offered? So as before, it's offered every single day, but you're not going to get a link to any of that information until you have an approved posted application with us. Can you show me slide 34, please? Not sure if they can go back up to that one. The presentation is available on the website to download all of those slides so that you can review that. And also this will be archived on the YouTube channel so that you can play the entire presentation back again.
And then Thor, how often is the license exam offered? I believe Ronald did answer that earlier. It's about 6 days a week. They offer morning through evenings. We believe that they're closed on Sundays, so it is 6 days a week. And they offer more times in the day for the testers.
Are you allowed to manufacture and sell products but hire a licensed contractor to install? If part of your selling process includes the installation of a process, you're going to have to be a licensed contractor. If you're just selling a product that you manufactured, that's retail, we don't cover that. But if that product is going to be installed according to contractors' laws or classifications, the person installing that will need to be a licensed contractor, and you as an unlicensed contractor would not be able to contract that installation.
If I wanted to take over my late father's business, I assume that I would have to go through the exact same process in order to get my license. Am I still able to keep my father's business name? So, Ruby Ann, I would ask that you send me an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov, and we'll need a little bit more information. The license number, what the business name was, information like that. So if you can include that in an email, again, to licensing@cslb.ca.gov, we'll be able to give you a little bit more of a definitive answer on that question.
I have 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees. Could I get credit for both degrees? As we stated previously, we will take the highest one, but they will only take one. They don't stack educational, so you can include both of them. They're going to look for the one that gives you the highest amount and accept that one. All right. Confirming I heard correctly, instead of having the university send the sealed envelopes of the transcripts directly to CSLB, have the applicant submit it in the sealed transcript envelope within the application so it doesn't get lost. That's exactly correct. Include your transcript with your application. Don't mail them in separately. We try to match them up, but there are instances where we are not able to match up the application with the transcript, and so they wouldn't get credit.
This might be, I think the next 2 might be duplicates. I have a BS in finance. Will 1 year journeyman be sufficient? Again, when your application comes in, we have to review what classification you've applied for, as well as review your transcripts. So we can't give a definitive answer on that. The one right after that, again, was I don't see any information on the license exam. It's offered 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, with a plethora of hours on those days, closed on Sundays.
I currently work for a general contractor with lots of construction management experience. I'm looking to apply for a B license as sole proprietor to have a license in my own name. However, once issued, I plan to be listed as an additional qualifier under my employer's current license. Do I need to register a business in my name? My name with Secretary of State in order to be licensed under my name and to be able to purchase a bond. So first, just getting your own license. So if you have 4 years of experience within the last 10 years in the B classification of work, which is projects concerning building of a structure, as well as 2 additional trades, you would be able to get your license as whatever you wanted, sole owner, corporation. To have a corporation, yes, you have to get it registered at the Secretary of State, and you can either get another license for your corporation and keep your sole owner, or you can transfer your sole owner to a corporation. Working as having a sole owner license and working for another person as their qualifier, you can do as a sole owner as long as you're not a responsible managing employee on the other one. If so, you would need to inactivate your sole owner license, as you could only be on one as a responsible managing employee. If you are a sole owner and you're going to be a responsible managing officer on the other license, then there are requirements to be able to qualify additional licenses, and those are in the law book and is under the qualifying of multiple licenses. On something like that, I would send in more specific information to the licensing email. Once again, licensing at cslb.ca.gov. Spell out exactly what you are attempting to do, and they can give you further clarification whether that's possible or not.
Is design work as a landscape designer at a landscape architecture firm considered valid experience for a C-27 work experience? Unfortunately, no. Hands-on. What we're looking for is somebody who was out there doing the work. If you were a 4-person, you know, how you got to that level. If you were a supervising employee, how you got to that level. But drawing up plans, designing and whatnot, that is not something that CSLB takes into consideration for work experience.
Would like to understand the PM answer a little better. If you are a project manager supervising employees, construction management type like superintendent, project engineer on a grounds up construction project, does that count as qualifying experience? Also, for coordinating over 40 trades and their foreman on site. So once again, if you are supervising employees of the company, that potentially can be experienced toward the classification that you're going for, depending upon how you came to the level of project manager, supervising manager. Supervising of subcontracted contractors does not, as those are fully qualified people that require no supervision on your part. You may be explaining them the project, but they are fully qualified and licensed people to perform that task and do not need supervision of the trade that they are performing.
My father and I are looking into obtaining a B2 license. I have a bachelor's degree in business, but I don't have the experience. My father has the necessary experience in working the trades. Would I qualify to take the exam? Unfortunately, no. In order for you to take the exam, you would have to be the one who has the work experience. And then you could also submit your degree as a potential education credit. If your father is the one who has the experience, he would be the one who would have to take the exam.
And that can be structured in multiple ways. I mean, you could still do a sole owner, that you were the owner and he was the qualifying responsible managing employee, since he has the experience. Or if you had a corporation, then you all can be officers in the corporation and he can be the responsible managing officer or a responsible managing employee again. So it's possible for you to have a business, but he, having the experience, would be the one that would be the qualifier and take the exam. What is the website to get started for the LLC? I am applying for C20. So to start for the LLC, to get an LLC started, you would be contacting the Secretary of State. That's where you would register your company as an LLC. For the application, once you have your LLC registered at Secretary of State, you would just get the original contractor's license, application 1 on our website and fill that out.
Where can I get the resources to study for the exam? They were listed. There was a link that was listed in the workshop that showed the study guides and any additional resources that you could study for your exams. You can always go back to the archived YouTube, our YouTube channel, and look at this to see what those what that hyperlink was.
Do I need a license to build freestanding furniture such as dining room table or dresser? No, unless that furniture needs to be installed. Now, if you are installing office furniture that needs to be bolted down, cubicles, there is a classification for that. But if you're just building furniture, that's fine. Cabinetry is another thing that requires installation. So anything that would require something to be installed, repaired, that's going to require a contractor's license.
How long does it take for an application to be reviewed and then processed? So applications, when they're mailed in, they go through several different units. So it starts in the mailroom, it goes to cashiers. From cashiers, it goes to a unit called IWAS, where it's put into a imaging system. Then it gets sent over to the unit. So as a basis, I generally state about 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it can be 4 to 8, but it's also dependent on how many applications we've received at that same time. They're all processed in the order they were received. So if you were number 50 in line and we're only up to 36, it might take a little bit longer. So there is no set in concrete how long does it take, but I would allow it at least 4 to 6 weeks total processing time.
All right. I am a licensed structural engineer. Does that count for any more experience than the engineering degree I have as well? So when you say licensed structural engineer, are you saying you're licensed with the Contractors Licensing Board as a general engineer? If that's the case, then if you already hold that classification, that would be a waiver on your application. If you're talking engineer and general license, that doesn't necessarily garner credit as education credit does. That's not going to bring anything to the experience. You would probably get more credit, or you would only get credit for your engineering degree and then whatever practical engineering experience you have for your application.
What is the address to mail the application and the check? So in the upper left-hand corner of your application, you will notice a little house that says CSLB, has a paintbrush, a saw, and our address is listed there as well as the information call center. However, our physical address is 9821 Business Park Drive, in Sacramento, California, 95827. But again, it is listed on the upper left-hand corner of all applications and forms.
All right. I have no general contractor's license or experience. I'm looking to own a franchise to do the restoration due to water damage, etc. Do I need a license? If yes, what's the process? Restoration usually means actual construction. There is remediation, of which you just remove mold, things like that from water damage. But that also is a specialty classification at the board. Any type of restoration, especially if it's going to be restoration with multiple trades, drywall, wood restoration, wood stud reframing, that's all going to usually fall under the B classification. But for something like that, they will more than likely have you do what they refer to as the 4 questions, which sends in exactly what you're looking to do with the license. But all of those things, yes, require a license, and you would do it in the process of any other classification. Fill out a original contractor's license application and send that in, looking through the classifications to see what would be the classification you're going for. Once again, if you're unsure, email classifications, and that's plural, classifications at cslb.ca.gov. List exactly what you're looking to do, and they will give you a determination of what classification or classifications you would need to perform that type of work.
Check will be payable to your registrar of contractor, and what is the address? So yes, per the application, Register of Contractors is acceptable. So is CSLB or Contractor State License Board. And that address again is located in the upper left-hand corner of the application. But our physical address is 9821 Business Park Drive, Sacramento, California, 95827. It doesn't show having a master's in construction management. I also have a BS in business. I do, however, have a sufficient amount of time in the construction industry as a superintendent. So if you have sufficient amount of time, work experience, I would suggest that you use that as your work experience if that was the question. If you don't need to use the education credit, I wouldn't use it. It doesn't add any extra stars by your name. If you have the experience hands-on, again, in work experience, I wouldn't submit the transcripts and I would just go with my work experience.
And just as a clarifying point, we take up to a bachelor's of science in degrees. Anything higher is going to get the same amount. So they may not list the master's in construction management on the list, because if you have the equivalent of a Bachelor of Science in that, the master's is just going to not gain you more for having the master's. They will take that as the same equivalent as a Bachelor of Science in construction management. The degree of the degree doesn't add more time. So whether it's a Bachelor in construction management, a master's, or a PhD, it's all going to get the same equivalent amount in construction management. I plan to be listed as an additional officer or qualifier under my employer's current license, but want to have my own license if I ever decide to work my own business. What is the best way to do this if I don't have my own business set up yet? One, if you're planning to do it as a business, you have to have your business set up first before you submit, unless you want to do it just as a sole owner as yourself. When you say additional qualifier under someone else's, there can only be one qualifier for each classification on a license. So yes, you can be an additional qualifier for different classifications, but the the best, you could either send in your question in more specific detail of what exactly you're trying to do to the licensing at cslb.ca.gov, but there are certain restrictions for you qualifying multiple licenses, and it will depend on what your license is and the license that you're qualifying and the classifications. So if you send an email in with exactly what you're trying to achieve, the classifications, who you're qualifying for, and everything, they can give you a more definitive answer to that question. Oh, can my verifiable experience come from an inactive contractor? Yes, your experience can come, well, let me clarify that. You couldn't have gained your experience from an inactive contractor because he's inactive. He shouldn't be out there contracting. But an inactive contractor can be your certifier. So if he has witnessed you performing firsthand the trades, whether yourself or for another contractor, yes, that's viable experience. He doesn't have to be an active contractor to be your certifier. However, we would look for a explanation of how you gained experience from someone who was an inactive contractor that should not be contracting out there. All right.
Does the RME take the exam, and what happens if the RME ever stops working with me? Did you already answer that?
I think this may be kind of an add-on to another. So an RME, yes, any qualifier has to take the exam. So whether they're an RME, RMO, the owner of a sole owner, all qualifiers will be taking the exam unless they've passed the exam before or they already hold that classification. If the RME stops, then that license needs another qualifier. If it's a sole owner, then either the owner needs to have the experience to become the qualifier, or the owner will need to find another qualifier with the experience to be the qualifier on that license. Same with a corporation or any other. When the qualifier leaves, that license needs to replace that qualifier within 90 days, or that license will be suspended for lack of qualifier.
And then just to add on to that, if they stop and they didn't disassociate themselves and you haven't disassociated them, you do want to notify CSLB within 90 days if they stop working for you. Because again, the board needs to be notified and know that everybody is still the same on the license. So if the RME quits working for you and did not disassociate themselves, then you would have to disassociate them, and then the process can go forward with replacing the qualifier. I am self-employer. What is the requirement for the work experience? I believe you're saying you're self-employed. So dependent upon the classification that you're applying for, you might need additional information. However, 4 years full-time experience within the last 10 years with the certifier listed on your certification of work experience form. Again, dependent on what classification you're applying for, you may be required to submit additional information.
Would 1 or 2 year experience be sufficient from a local ROC program? Once again, it depends on the program. If it's high school level, it's not going to count because you're under the age of majority. So once again, as in many of these general questions, we would need to know more experience. If it's a actual college program, you would need to submit any completion certificates or degree graduation certificates to us for us to review. That would be handled on a case-by-case basis. There's no way to tell you how much experience you get from any type of program or education?
2015, I submitted an application. I took an exam, but I didn't pass. I missed the time to retake again. The thing is, I no longer, I guess, speak to the contractor guy who signed off my work experience. How do I have, how can I do if I have a lot of experience to apply for a general B? If you took the exams and didn't pass in 2015, that's void because you were never licensed, so that's not going to count. However, and you don't have a relationship with whoever certified your work experience in the past. If you've continued to work from 2015 till now, you do want to have a certifier on your new application who could certify your work experience. You still have to have 4 years full-time experience, and it does have to be within the last 10 years. So you could go back right now to July of 2013, but you still have to have a certifier. Whether or not it's who certified you before, that doesn't matter. The certifier has to be someone who has firsthand knowledge of that experience.
And even if you don't have contact with that contractor, if you have relationships with anybody who had firsthand knowledge of the work you did back then, it doesn't have to be the contractor. It could be a fellow employee that you worked with at the time that could become your certifier. So just within the last 10 years, anybody who has firsthand knowledge of you performing the trades that they're going to list on the certification of work experience.
How self-employed can prove work experience? So again, it's dependent upon the classification. And if you worked out in the field, somebody would have to have had firsthand knowledge of your experience. So let's say you're applying for the C27 landscaping, and you did it with a business license with your city or your county. Since you didn't work for a licensee, you could have the people who you did your work for, who hired you to perform that work, certify you on your certification of work experience form. Again, 4 years full-time experience within the last 10 years, one work experience form per certifier. If additional information was needed, again, based upon the classification that you're applying for, after review of your application, then your processing technician would request additional information. At this point, before applying, we can't possibly tell you what might be needed additionally to your certification of work experience forms.
I worked for an employer for the last 13 years. He has been inactive for 2 years now. Can he be my experience and confirmation? So you've worked for him for 13 years. We're only interested in the last 10 years. If those 2 years of inactive was in the last 10 years, that still leaves you 8 years that you should have possibly been employed by him, that he had an active license and could speak to your experience. So he could still be your certifier. You just need 4 years or 48 months in the last 10 years. And they don't even have to be concurrent. If he had a license, you worked for him for 2 years, and then he went inactive for 2 years, and then he reactivated it 2 years later, and you worked for him for 2 more years, that's going to work. But the 2 years that he's inactive, they won't give you credit for work during that time working for him, as he should not have been working.
How do I get started? Well, you should have your experience first, and then you're going to complete an application, determine your business name and your entity, and send in your application fee with your completed application, and we will take it from there. Make sure that you do have a certifier, that you've completed everything that is required to be completed on the application, and that you have 4 years experience within the last 10 years in the classification that you're applying for.
Please repeat the email ID again. So I'll repeat it, and then also at the end of the presentation here in just a couple minutes, they'll also put up the screen that has the various emails, addresses, and once again, this whole presentation will be archived on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and reference that again. So for general information, or specific information to your situation of maybe the type of entity or changing entities, you're going to want to send that to licensing@cslb.ca.gov. And also, if you have a question on the classification that you should be using, you're going to send a description of the trades that you intend to perform and what the job entails, as specific as possible. That's going to go to classifications, plural, classifications @cslb.ca.gov. All right. And that looks like it for today. So we will thank you for coming today.
Okay, so that's all the time we have today for our workshop. Thank you for all your questions. If you have any other questions about your application, we encourage you to drop an email to our licensing division. Here's the email address. It's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Again, that's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. If at some point you need to reschedule your exams, you can get that process started by dropping an email to exams@cslb.ca.gov. We've also put together a list of available resources for women considering a career in construction. If you haven't already, be sure to download this presentation to get them. You can download the presentation on the green banner on the top of our homepage, which is www.cslb.ca.gov. If you're watching the archive video of this workshop on our YouTube page, you'll find a link to the presentation down below.
We welcome your comments or topics for future webcasts. Just drop us an email at social@cslb.ca.gov. Special thanks to our Licensing Division and Public Affairs Office for their help on this workshop. The Get Licensed to Build workshop is a copyrighted production of the California Contractors State License Board. Thank you for watching.